Okay, well, welcome to this week's Halacha Shir. As ever, we try and connect it to this week's Sedra. This week's Parsha is Balak, and if you think about it, there was a Mekach. There was a sort of a false premise and understanding and transaction that took place, because Balak hired Bilam to curse Klal Yisrael, and he said he would, and he ended up blessing them. So it's a little bit of a tenuous segue, but a segue nonetheless for our topic. Again, I'm grateful to Rabbi Daniel Rosler. I've got this topic from him, but ultimately it's a tshuva of the Minchas Osher, which I think you'll find very interesting. What is the background case? The background case is something which could happen. You could see this happening. It did happen, but you could see this happening more broadly. A fellow bought a laptop. He was in America. He lived in Israel, but he bought a laptop in America, and he came back to Israel. And for whatever reason, he decided he doesn't need this laptop anymore. So he wanted to sell it on. It's worth, a fair bit of money. So he wanted to sell it on. It came with a 12-month warranty. So when he found someone to buy it, the guy questioned straight away, goes, "It looks good. This is the sort of thing I'm looking for. But does it have a warranty?" And the fellow said, "Yeah, 12-month warranty." Fine. They agreed a price. He bought it, and he used it. And after 10 months of usage, it broke. Now, he went back to the seller and he said, "Listen, it broke and I'd like to use the warranty. I had a 12-month warranty." He looked into the warranty, and actually the 12-month warranty had expired. Why? Because the guy who bought it had held on to it for a while. The 12-month warranty obviously began when he bought it, and then by the time he came back to Israel, found the person to buy it from him. It took a few months, and therefore, by the time it broke, the warranty was out. So the question is, who's at fault here? How do you deal with this situation? And if there is compensation, how do you calculate that? So it's a very interesting case. Let's take a look at the Minchas Osher, the way he describes the background situation. This is, if you're listening online, please email me at j.golker@gmail.com. I'll send you the handout. Says the Minchas Osher, Chelik Gimel Siman Kuf Yud. Bedin Mekach toys b'mechashev nayad, with a portable computer. Bedin odvarim bein hatovea tzad aleph. He's the first litigant. Shekona mechashev nayad. He bought this laptop. Mehanitba tzad beis, the other fellow, the seller. Sheviu me'artzos habritz. He bought it from America. Hanitba oma letovea. The person was claiming shelemechashev yesh nas achrayas. He's got a year's warranty. V'amanas kain kona, and he said, "This is on this basis I bought it." La'achar ka'asor chadoshim, and after 10 months, shesad echod also shimush b'mechashev, after using this computer, his kalkula marech m'suyemes v'yotzorech l'sakme. It was fixed and needed repair. Ach kashem moses mechashev l'tikun. When he took it to the repairman, his barle shepog toikef hachrayas somuch l'zman ha'mekach. That it turned out that the warranty had expired. And then the guy said, and got worse news, not only has your warranty expired, but the computer is irreparable. So the Taveh said, so fine, it's a Mekach tois, we need to undo what we did. You sold me something on the basis there's a 12-month warranty. There wasn't a 12-month warranty when you sold it to me. It was, say 7 or 8 months. And therefore, when it broke after 10 months, I couldn't do anything about it. And that's not fair. And I bought it on the understanding there's a 12-month warranty. Why? Wear and tear of portable computers, of laptops, is very common. And certainly as you get towards the end of the warranty period, the need often to repair it is very real. I only bought it on the premise there should be a 12-month warranty. Now, the seller said, "But you should have checked. You could have checked the database of the seller of the computer in question, and that's your problem. You should have checked it. You should have realized that there was only 9 months, 8 months, whatever it was left. And since you didn't do it, you have ultimately acquiesced. You've agreed to buy it with a shorter warranty." And he bases it on a Magid Mishnah and a Sma. V'chein kosu ha-Magid Mishnah, you've got the Maramakomis v'ha-Sma. D'chol sheyachol haya livdek v'loi bodak, whenever a person, the buyer, could have checked and didn't, shuv ein yachol litzei mekach tois. You can no longer claim mekach tois when you, the buyer, could have checked and didn't check. Okay, so just interesting to know your thoughts. What would you say? Put your hands up if you think the guy who sold the computer is going to win. Put your hands up if you think the person who bought the computer is going to win. Okay, almost all of you. Okay, very good. So says the Minchas Osher, which is largely according to what most of you were thinking, all of us were thinking. The buyer wins. Why? Logic seems to dictate you were offered a year's guarantee, and that's the rationale for you buying it. It's true. You knew this guy bought it in America, and the 12-month had already, the clock had already started ticking, and therefore, it took a little bit of time for him to come back from America to find the buyer. I understand that. To find someone, maybe it took a few weeks, but not many months. And therefore, true, he understood that normally it takes a few weeks for him to travel back and the warranty has already started, but it's not going to take that period of months, and therefore, true, a few weeks of the 12-month warranty could have gone. That would have been reasonable to expect. But to then understand, to find out that many months had passed, that would be too difficult. Okay, and therefore, the Rabbi Weiss, the Minchas Osher, ruled in favor of the buyer and considered the Mekach as a bought. He bought the laptop with a guarantee, and it's reasonable to expect the guarantee is valid, and that the seller sold it soon after he had bought it, unless he informed him otherwise. Now, the shaila is though, what about the seller's claim? What about this Magid Mishnah? What about the Sma? That surely, that the buyer should have checked the expiry of the guarantee, and if he doesn't, then it's not a Mekach Tos, as per the Magid Mishnah and the Sma. What are we going to do with that? So Rabbi Weiss rejects that for three reasons. So if you turn over the page, he gives three very interesting reasons. And that which he claims, excuse me 1 second. Yeah. And that which he claims, for three reasons. He said, I don't accept what the seller argues for three reasons. Very interesting. Number one, even according to the Magid Mishnah and the Sma, that the onus is on the buyer to have checked out this guarantee, and if he didn't, there's not a Mekach Tos. That's only true for something that the seller doesn't expressly promise. But when the Meiche Omar Befeirush She'ein Boi Mum, the Meiche says explicitly that there is no fault with this thing whatsoever, Rishai HaLokeach Lismech Al Dvarov, the Lokeach, the buyer, can rely on that. And he doesn't have to, no onus on him to investigate further. And in our situation, the seller promised a 12-month guarantee. Why should the Lokeach be dubious to say that maybe it's not 12 months, maybe I'll go into the database of the manufacturers to check the guarantee. That's not reasonable to expect them to do that. Fine. Number two, another reason. The be'emes lo hayu biyad lekach livdei klal. It's actually not incumbent upon the buyer to investigate this at all. Which basically means that it's not something he could find out particularly easily. You need to have a certain serial code, and you have to contact the manufacturer, and it's quite onerous to do that. And therefore, it would not be expected of him to do that. Fine. And then, third of all, in any event, the contemporary poskim, or the later poskim after the Magid Mishnah and the Sma, actually argue and debate whether or not the halacha is like the Sma and the Magid Mishnah. Whether or not the Lokeach, it's incumbent upon the buyer to investigate this. Dachu shitazu min halacha. So for all of the three reasons above, the Minchas Yitzchak is of the opinion that the buyer is entitled to get his compensation. Now, the real issue over here, one of the considerable issue is, how do you calculate that compensation? Because let's say, for example, let's say the laptop cost in America $500. Let's say in English currency that's £300, give or take. Yeah. So let's say it's £300, just for a round number, just for ease. $400, they say £300. So the thing is broken. How do you calculate compensation? So one way to calculate it could be that what would it cost to rent a computer? Let's say you went to a computer rental place and you say you need to take a laptop, you're going away for a few months, and it's going to cost me, I don't know, $100 a month, say £50 a month to take it, I'm going to be away for 10 months. So if you work it out based on rental value, because essentially the buyer has, you could have rented one for 10 months, you're going to come to a figure which is going to be greater than the actual cost of the computer. So says the Minchas Yitzchak, that cannot be. Take a look at the last paragraph. How much does the buyer get back? What's the compensation? And it's a kashem isbatla mekach yischai v'atoveh l'shalem l'nitva d'mei shimush kol tkuvas hashimush b'mechashev, that the yischai v'atoveh, the claimant, has got to pay the nitba d'mei shimush kol tkuvas hashimush. He's got to say whatever usage there was. So the cost of usage. How do you calculate that? So in other words, the Minchas Osher says that the buyer doesn't just get back the actual amount, because he needs to deduct the Dmei Shtamshus. What does that mean? So say, for example, let's say the laptop costs £300, sorry. And let's say the cost of usage of that, you've got to deduct that. Because if I give him back £300, he did use it for 10 months and then it broke. So we need to deduct from the £300 the amount of the cost of the actual usage. So my point is, says the Minchas Osher, that if you calculate that, let's say £50 a month, for 10 months, you're going to exceed the actual cost of the laptop. So surely that's not going to be the correct amount. So that's the first point that Minchas Osher makes over there in the last box. He ultimately has benefited from 10 months worth of usage of this laptop. The i.e., the Minchas Osher works it out as, let's say, $70 a week to hire a laptop. Because it's going to turn out that the amount of usage which you're deducting is going to far exceed the actual cost of the laptop. You've got to come to some sort of agreement and compromise. What does that mean? In other words, you've got to figure out what is the average lifespan of a PC, of a computer, of a laptop. What would you say? How long would you expect a laptop to last for? 3 years? 3 years? 4 years? So let's say it's for 3 years. And let's say, that's why I chose $300. I knew for some reason you were going to say 3 years. So let's say it was £300, this laptop. So you work it out that approximately each year costs £100. So if he's already used it for 10 months, let's say almost a full year, you would presumably knock off £100 and you would return to the buyer £200. And essentially that's what the Minchas Osher is saying. That when you work out what is the average lifespan of the item that you bought, in this case the laptop, approximately 3 years, you pay £300 for it, it broke after 10 months, so you estimate if it costs £200 a year, then approximately £300 for the thing, it's £100 a year, and therefore the seller has to return £200 to the buyer. Now, he used it for 10 months, so 10 months is not exactly £100. How would you explain that? You could say that the first 10 months of the usage of a laptop, of a new laptop, is actually probably equal to a year later on in the life of the computer. Because the first 10 months is more effective, it's better, it's fresher. And again, it's a pshara, it's a suggested psak. So if you look at the end, lefichach nira, if you look at the last line of the Minchas Osher, lefichach nira lenachos to deduct b'shvil hashimush she'osa hareichesh schum she'ein lo shlish mechir hamechashiv. The mistabek omer lechalek es techeles hachayim shemechashiv na toch kedei shimush tadir. Well lechalek zman zeh ba'ofen she'aschirus lo yale al erech hamechashiv etc. V'chol zeh b'derech pshara k'nira l'nivastaiti. So in other words, the lifetime is estimated about 3 years, so about 1/3 of the cost. And even though the buyer used it for 10 months and not 1 year, the first 10 months of a new laptop equals more than a year of an older laptop. And that's exactly what he paskened. And again, it's B'toras Pshara, that's what he suggested to the two parties, and the two parties agreed to that, then they can do it B'toras Pshara. But he was giving you a bit of sort of halachic guidelines as to how we deal with this situation. So just to summarize what was the case, the summary is that we spoke about a Mekach Tos in the case of the broken laptop in this week's Parsha, Parshas Bolok, because Parshas Bolok ultimately is a Mekach Tos. Bolok hires Bilam to curse the Jewish people, he pays him money to do so, and he fails in that job description. So as a Mekach Tos, what happened between Bilam and Bolok? Well, wait for this week's Parsha. What was the background case in our particular situation? That a guy buys a laptop, the warranty is for 12 months, he wants the warranty. The guy bought the laptop in America, he realizes he doesn't want it, changes his mind for whatever reason, he comes back to Israel, and he finds a buyer, and he says to the buyer to buy it from him, let's say £300, and then after 10 months it dies, he wants to use the warranty has expired, because the seller hadn't told him that it took several months for him to come back from America and to sell it. So the shaila is, what does he get? So as we've discussed, the ruling of Rav Asher Weiss is he ruled in favor of the buyer, and he considered the Mekach Tos because he bought the laptop with the guarantee, and it was reasonable to expect the guarantee was valid, and the seller sold it soon after he came out from America, and if that was not the case, then the seller should have told him that. And what about the Maggid Mishnah, the claim that the buyer should have checked the expiry of the guarantee, and he didn't, and therefore it's a Mekach Tos. That's what the Maggid Mishnah and the Sma both paskin. So Rav Osner rejected it for the three reasons we mentioned. And actually, how much does he actually pay back? So the answer is, you estimate what is the actual yearly usage of the laptop. If he bought it for £300, then the yearly usage is going to be about approximately £100 a year, and therefore, since he used it for the best part of a year, we deduct £100, and therefore he should give him back £200. And again, as he concludes, it's b'derech pshara, it's in a way of compromise, and that should, if they both agree that, then that's what should happen. Okay, Peseda.